Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by...
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We are all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Hello, welcome to Popcorn Psychology. We are recording remotely again. In case you aren't aware, Chicago is very cold right now. That's where we are. It's like negative wind chill factor. So we are recording once again in our own homes. So if you notice any difference with the sound in this episode, that's why. We appreciate you guys continuing to be very gracious, as I'm sure our tech and sound did all over the place the past year, as everything has been all over the place the past year, I think, for everybody.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about our fan-picked Valentine's Day episode, which will be Sleepless in Seattle. It was a close race. It almost got, taken over by, I think Like a Man. And I think also there was a very strong write-in on Facebook for 500 Days of Summer, but we had to honor our votes. So Sleepless in Seattle is our winner.
Race with Deadpool emerging as a late race favorite. So,
but also,
if we do a poll again next year, vote for Deadpool.
No, we won't be, because it won't be an option, and anything that's not an option will not be chosen.
So Deadpool will be an official option, and please choose it.
Oh, Benjamin, where's your romance? Where's your spirit of romance?
I lost it in Batman Forever with
Oh my
Chase Meridian.
God.
Nice, good job. You got it in a Batman reference in the top 5 minutes.
I owe you 2 because I forgot one last time.
Okay. So we're going to be talking about, Sleepless in Seattle, the classic 1993 Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks vehicle. We're going to be talking about Sam and Jonah primarily, who is the Tom Hanks character and his son, their relationship. And we're going to talk about bereavement, parenting after the death of a spouse, so becoming a single parent, and then dating after losing a spouse as well. We're also going to be talking about Meg Ryan's character, Annie, and the topics of emotional cheating and, we hate to say it, stalking. And then, as always, we'll be talking about treatment and final thoughts. So for anyone who's not aware, Sleepless in Seattle is a movie about a man named Sam whose wife dies in the beginning of the movie, and then it kind of goes forward a year and a half, where he and his son Sam, who's 8 years old, have moved across the country to Seattle, and
from our lovely Chicago.
Yeah, and Jonah's trying to kind of match his dad up by calling a talk show like a Dr. Laura. If anyone remembers what Dr. Laura is, that might be too much of a reference, but a talk show radio program with a therapist to try to match him up. His dad becomes then a nationwide sensation as this like sweet single man. And one of the women who kind of becomes enamored with him is Meg Ryan's character, Annie, who then proceeds to hunt him down, maybe?
Yeah, hunt him down is correct.
And they end up happily ever after at the end of the movie.
Well, sort of. They hold hands and they walk into an elevator. I mean, that
Without
is
really
romantic stuff.
Yeah. So we can jump right into it.
Hot and heavy.
Yeah. So as we were saying,
I was told so.
Ben does not have a romantic heart, I feel like we're discovering.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Andy's the only one in a relationship on this podcast.
I've been in a relationship for 12 years.
Like I said, when this movie opens, it's literally at the funeral of Sam's wife and Jonah's mom. And I think one thing I noticed right away, which I wrote down in my notes, was the way that he talks to Jonah throughout this movie, but in this particular scene about death and where his mom is really radical. and kind of awesome to see as a child therapist. I didn't mean to use the word radical because I'm about to talk about radical acceptance is a concept within therapy, which is exactly how it sounds. You kind of radically accept the situation that you're in because you can't control that part of it that you're radically accepting. So it's kind of like letting go of what you can't control and instead trying to focus on the things that you can. And in the very beginning of the movie, I didn't write any quote particularly, which I'm kind of annoyed by. But the way he's talking to Jonah at the gravesite really made me think of radical acceptance. Like, we can't do anything about what's going to happen to your mom. All we can do is sort of like keep going. It's kind of like the energy of that discussion. And it was really, I don't know, like enlightened in a way that I don't think you see in movies where adults are talking to kids about death.
And I feel like the other thing that they show in the opening scene also is that he is standing with Jonah off to the side. I feel like a lot of times when we watch movies like this and someone has passed and there's children involved, the children are not always, but like very often not next to the parents. Usually somebody else is taking care of
like
them.
A grandma.
Yeah. And not that there's anything wrong with that by any means, but just that I think one of the things that I really liked about this is it almost felt like reinforcing that they're still a family, even though they're his mom and his wife is gone.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's really the only scene we get of that time period besides him deciding to move to Seattle. And then it like jumps forward like a year and a half.
Right, where he just randomly feels like he needs a change and just goes from work to go, you know what? We just need a change. We need something that doesn't look like my wife every day. A place that I can go without seeing her everywhere.
I guess, what are your guys' thoughts about that as therapists?
I am generally 100% against that approach. Not necessarily moving from a house or changing a house around, but the idea that you can move away from your grief, from your sadness, from your problems is a fantasy thing that a lot of people shake up. Like, we just need a new start somewhere. But what they don't realize is that with a new start often comes not knowing anybody and then being isolated and thinking about, not only am I lonely because I lost my wife, my relationship, my husband, what have you, but now that I don't have my friends either. And I'm in a different time zone and I don't know anybody or anything or where anything is. And that not only can your problems that you're trying to get away from, they'll still be with you, is that you'll have more.
And I feel like, I'm sorry, Ben, did you want to finish?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think that there's can be value in changing your space or moving or shifting around some things, but that most of the reasons that I see people give don't end up working out when I have clients who do so.
Yeah, and I feel like in terms of dealing with grief like this, making any major life decisions in the first year can be really hard, because I think it is kind of like what you said, Ben, that the idea that we'll go someplace else and I won't feel as sad, or like this kind of idea that if I change all of these things, all of a sudden I won't be sad, or whatever magical thinking I think that goes along with a tragic loss like this. And so I feel like they did a good job of trying to show that it really is that he just has memories all over the city of Chicago and just like maybe feels like it's just a cloud that just follows him around and he can't get away from it. And the thing is, he's not going to be able to get away from it in Seattle either. But I think there's a sense that it just feels different and that he can't. I mean, I understand, but at the same time, as a therapist, if I had somebody like him in my office, I would definitely talk about, like you said, Ben, like, do you want to move the house around, or do you want to move to a different place to live? Like, that totally makes sense. But like, let's wait 6 months and see what it feels like. And then see if those changes don't help you feel more like yourself. Right.
Exactly that. Because the other thing that you got to factor in is like, what's going on for your kid? You know, like, are you going to take your kid from all of their supports and their friends too.
I guess what I would argue is if he's 8 now, then he was 6.5 when his mom died, or around that age.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think shifting him to a whole new environment probably wouldn't be too hard on him because he's so young. I don't know.
Fair.
You can disagree with me if you think that's wrong.
Well, then,
I'm not going to disagree with you about child development. That's your specialty. You're the expert on that here.
Well, and I feel like also the fact that because he's 6.5, he's maybe in school. Not that he doesn't have any friends. Like I would never say, oh, he probably doesn't have any friends, but that the school environment might not be something that he's fully entered yet. So that moving the time that he did might have kind of felt like it made sense to his dad in terms of, we'll go someplace else. He'll just be starting school. That way he can have that way we won't be moving in the middle of him starting school and creating those friendships and those connections. Whether or not he thought that much about this decision or that part of it, I don't know.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at 6.5, that you'd be in first grade, maybe kindergarten, depending on what time of year you're born in. So,
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. That, is a fair counter to my concern. But I think that where we're at with Dad is that, he's obviously going to be moving away from his sister and his family and everything that he knows and his friend network. And that is, generally speaking, a decision that unless someone is a very, very extroverted extrovert can struggle with.
And you can see at the beginning of the movie, he's trying to find the solution when that guy at work comes up to him and he's giving him a card and he's like kind of irritably, understandably so, like kind of takes that stack of cards out of his pocket and he's like, there's this thing and throw yourself into your work. Like work will save you, not working. Like that he is looking for the thing and he's getting progressively frustrated, maybe even resentful that none of these things, none of these solutions, none of these business cards are taking his pain from him, which makes a lot of sense.
Well, it does. And that is a major problem that we have in Western culture, in Midwestern culture, in American male culture, just in American culture in general, is we try to avoid pain. We act like we can get away from pain, and that to see someone healed is to take their pain away when that's not real and that's not the way it works. We have to feel the pain. We have to process it and find a place for it and deal with it and let our mind reorganize all the files we have on people we've lost from actively in our life to past memories. And that's a heavy, heavy lift. You got to reorganize every single file in your brain. And that's hard. And you can't get, if people of significance leaving our life had no impact, and they'd have no significance.
Yeah.
So trying to take away someone's pain is invalidating.
And I feel like the added stress of also having a child who may look like your loved one or has different characteristics of your loved one, and having to see that. And again, not that that's necessarily would be a negative thing, but just that there's this constant reminder, and also this other person, this little person who's also trying to process the same thing that you are, but with it at 6.5, like developmentally, it's pretty hard for him to grasp in terms of the abstract concept of death in general.
And we do say, I know we use the word bereavement up front, which we've talked about in other episodes, but it's used a lot, like as the technical term for grief and, death, like at workplaces, you can have bereavement leave. We talk about, it's also the term that's used in therapy as well, like diagnostically, the term bereavement is used as well. He definitely has signs of someone who is struggling with bereavement. He's not sleeping, that's hence the title of the movie. He is really irritable. It makes me wonder though, how much of that is his personality and how much of that is his grief. Cause he is his style of communicating, especially with Jonah, is pretty it seems like Jonah understands him and they have a good rapport, but he is really
he's kind of snappy.
Yeah. He's very snappy is a good way to put it. And I wonder if that snappiness is new or, has developed since the wife died. Because he is or it might just be like, as we've talked about on many an episode, and Ben could talk about it all over the place, is how men feel anger when they're feeling sad, or men's sadness and despair can present as anger and irritability, which might be what we're seeing here as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's definitely part of what we're seeing. Like, he may be an irritable kind of guy. Like, he seems like he kind of walks around with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but all we really get to know is him grieving and then trying to move through that process. As we definitely see the bereavement process when he's in Chicago. I think that's the bereaved version, because the difference between bereavement and grief is bereavement is typically defined by a 30-day period following a loss, where you are dealing with the expected symptoms such as sadness, crying, tearfulness, feelings of hopelessness, loss of interest, no energy, all these kinds of things that we see that we would typically ascribe to depression. We wouldn't ascribe to depression when bereavement better describes it, because they've had an obvious loss in their life, and we expect that to be the normal reaction to an abnormal situation that persists for about 30 days. And once we start getting outside of 30 days-ish, outside of a loss, it's when we would start considering, has this become depression?
Absolutely. And that I think that one of the things that I like about the way, I feel like this is such a good example of what the pattern of normal grief would be like as well. Like the fact that we jump a year and a half later and he does seem to be more like himself. It seems like him and Jonah are established where they are. They seem comfortable in their new surrounding. And also he still has some appropriate sadness and still feels, and I think, the whole premise is that Jonah thinks that he needs a new wife. And so that's how we get to the psychiatrist phone call. But at the same time, I do really feel like it's just a good example, because it takes time. Like, grief like this takes time, and a year and a half is very normal and natural to be still in this process of deciding if you want to be romantic with anyone else again, if you have any hope or any idea about what that might be like. But I think one of the things I really love about this movie is all of the different conversations that he has with Jonah are so appropriate in terms of boundaries with him, where he gives him enough information so that he's not confused, but doesn't give him too much information that would scare him or just make him, or just like something he can't understand or can't connect to. Like, I really, even the parts where, like, when he calls him, when he's on that date, when he goes on that date and he calls him at the restaurant, he does not even address. Like, he automatically goes to, are you hurt? Are you bleeding? Yes or no? The answer is no. I'm not talking to you right now. Like, there is no arguing about why did you call? Like, he very much is like, I'm setting a boundary. Like, you have a babysitter. You are not hurt. We are not talking right now. And that's such a clear boundary that also gives appropriate frustration, that letting Jonah know, like, this is not okay. You're not allowed to do this. But also, you're okay. I'm okay. I'll see you when I get home.
Yeah, I think that scene was an excellent depiction of boundary setting, and their communication in general, I thought, was definitely a real positive of this movie. I thought that the parenting shown by Sam was really a good example and felt realistic.
Yes,
absolutely.
It felt like there was appropriate degrees of emotion. Like, Tom Hanks wasn't trying to play super dad. He was trying to play a dad.
Yes.
Trying to figure it out. And I thought he did a really good job with that. And I especially thought that was highlighted in the conversations they started to have about what it might be like to move on or to start dating somebody else. And, like, his dad starting to explain to him the differences between getting married and seeing people and trying people on and seeing if they work. And even the way he handled the Jonah asking him about sex, I thought was fantastic. And especially for 93, I could see that being a revolutionary scene at that point in time, because instead of him shaming him or like getting down on him for watching HBO or whatever it was that premium channels where he was watching, watching softcore porn, basically, is that finding out that, or having his kid come up to him like, is she going to scratch your back or whatever?
She's going to scratch your back all up? I guess you guys are going to have sex. Is she going to scratch your back all up?
The way
he's like, that's what I see people say.
Right. But the way he handled that, I thought was great, is that he was just kind of approaching that with gentleness and curiosity, and he didn't shame Jonah for having that question or asking that, because even though it's probably inappropriate for an 8-year-old to be asking their parent that, he doesn't know that, and his dad not shaming him and creating a barrier in their relationship where that topic's going to be a issue later, I thought was a really positive thing, which is a welcome change from what we saw when we watched Easy A and the way sex is handled in that one.
Mm-hmm. I would say this movie going forward a year and a half was a great move in terms of the narrative. So we aren't, like you were saying, Hannah, we're not like deep in the grief. We don't stay there. We're kind of we're in that interesting place where you're transitioning out of bereavement and you're kind of transitioning into like starting kind of the new life post your wife or post mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like truly like, and I think an interesting article to look up is Patton Oswalt is a comedian who also lost his wife very suddenly. It was like, I think just a bad mix of prescribed medication that just his wife died in her sleep, unfortunately. And so all of a sudden he was the single dad of a 6-year-old, just like this movie. And he writes a really touching article that I can't think of the name of it, but if you Google him and this theme, it'll come right up, about what it's like to all of a sudden be a single parent. And I think specifically being a single dad who is used to having someone else. He's very honest and vulnerable. Like when you're used to having someone else who knows everything, like who knows the doctor's names and the appointments and the carpool. And he also talks, I think, about, if I remember correctly, how supported he felt by the community of like moms kind of helping him as he flubbed his way through this unexpected responsibility or just unexpected role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I also appreciate about this movie, not to get too off topic, and I don't know if this is just because it goes for a year and a half, is this movie doesn't do that really misogynistic thing where Tom Hanks is like, I don't know how to parent. I don't know even how to like make a sandwich for my kid. Like I send my kid to school with like a Diet Coke and a steak in his lunch bag, and it's not even cooked. Like, and yeah, and he doesn't even know like have like matching clothes, and just sort of like that weird narrative we sell of like dads are fumbling idiots if the wife isn't around.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so I think what this movie, and maybe I honestly, like, I would guess that we wouldn't have seen that even if we'd been from that year and a half. Because I think what I also really appreciate about this movie and their relationship, Sam and Jonah, which we've kind of touched upon, is how connected they are, and how it seems like, my guess would be is that Sam, the dad, was always a pretty equal part in the rearing of Jonah, even before the wife died. Maybe she probably took more responsibility, just because I'm assuming because it's the late 80s, early 90s. But it doesn't seem like he was all of a sudden like the primary caregiver of this kid. He seems like you were saying, even in the funeral scene, it's like this movie does a continued job of reiterating that they are connected. Like they're always touching. They're very close physically. They're very naturalistic in the way that they interact with each other. It doesn't seem like they had to learn how to be together post the mom's death. It seems like they already were. And he's so comforting with him. And like you were saying too, which is this is my favorite kind of parenting reaction, which is you just let your kid ask questions. You don't make a big to-do. You just kind of try to answer their questions as honestly and appropriately as you can. And you see that several times, like you were bringing up the sex conversation, also when he talks about like heaven And that was another moment, like you were referencing, Ben, where I thought that was pretty radical for the 90s, that it wasn't like a heaven conversation or a conversation about God where it got weirdly religious in the middle of this movie. He was
it was
very
appropriately, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know. And he wasn't trying to scare Jonah or like push his beliefs on Jonah. He was just like, this is a subject I don't know the answer to. And I want to be honest with you about that. And he's also like petting his hair during that. And he's just very physically with him. And then when he says, I can't remember her, or I'm starting to forget her, and he just hugs him and is present for him. And he doesn't coddle him either. It's such a good balance of he treats Jonah with so much respect when he deserves respect. He treats him like a kid when he's a kid. But he doesn't, it's a beautiful balance of setting limits while also respecting your child's feelings and what they're going through. And not, like, even when he's frustrated with Jonah, it's not this huge, inappropriate, over the top reaction either. Which I really appreciated. And I would say
it's not a whole. It's not a whole thing. He does really well.
Mm-hmm. And so I think one thing I also noticed is they are pretty buddy, which could just be the dynamic of like a dad and a male child, like two dudes duding out in their houseboat or whatever it is that they live on. They're like sort of floating house. And I think it is that I think we've talked about this in other episodes. When you are a single child, like an only child to a single parent, there can just be an indirect result can just be that there's a bit more partnership to your relationship than there might be if there were other kids or a spouse. And not in like a bad way, just in kind of you're in it together in a way that you wouldn't be if there were more people in the family unit.
And I think they did a good job of highlighting that. And I think all of what you said is well said. And I think the other thing I'd like to tie on to that is that they did a good job of showing positive, non-toxic masculinity, of being able to talk about their feelings without it being, we don't talk about our feelings, we don't shut that down. Like when Jonah told him he was starting to forget mom and was really sad, Sam just gave him a hug and validated his feelings and didn't try to pick it her one way, and then started telling like a little bit of a story to kind of, like stay in that moment with him. I thought that was really good. Like, I really liked their relationship. This part of this movie I felt was a really good example of what positive fatherhood and positive male to male relationship can look like without needing to be pushing anybody's masculinity in any direction or anything like that. Just going like, we are men and we have feelings, and that's okay. And that doesn't need to be challenged, questioned, debated. It's just, we're having feelings in this particular moment. Let's have these feelings and, kind of address them healthily. I thought that was great.
And I would say too, like when Jonah calls the talk show and his dad figures out that he called the talk show, he doesn't yell at him. He doesn't, really punish him. I think he does a really good job of recognizing that Jonah's going through it too, and that they're both, just in it. And so, like, I love the part when they're both on the phone together and he waves him over and he's like, just come over here. We're both on the phone with this psychiatrist. And I think he does, I don't know, in that moment, I wonder if he's like, Jonah needs this, so I'm just going to comply.
I think that was punishment. When Jonah was hiding, he's
yeah?
oh no.
No, that's true.
We're doing this. We're doing this.
Yeah.
But you're sitting in this now. We're doing this. You made this happen, so you don't get to hide from it and just be like, oh, dad gets on the phone. Like, I think maybe it's a blend of both of those. Like, it wasn't all punishment, but it's like an acknowledgement of, fine, if you think we need this, then we both need it, and we're both doing it, and that's going to happen, and you did this. So, no, I'm not going to yell at you. We're not going to make this a thing, but I will be damned if you think you're going to sneak off and hide in the corner.
Well, and what a good example of natural consequences.
That's exactly, I was about to say natural consequences too, Hannah. Yes. And in case anyone doesn't I use the term natural consequences all the time in therapy. In the work I do with parents and kids, of just like letting your kids sit in the discomfort of whatever's going to happen. Don't save them in those moments. And he definitely doesn't save Jonah from that moment. He didn't let him hide in the other room down the hall like he was trying to. He was like, you made this happen. And I don't know, it was interesting watching Sam also, like, definitely was processing his grief, though, over that phone call as well. Like, talking about his wife and all those things. Like, he was definitely actively processing, which makes me wish he'd gone to traditional therapy.
Yeah. And my hope is that maybe, and I mean, I guess we get an indication that maybe he hasn't gone, but my hope would be that in that year and a half that he did go, even if it was only for a little bit, just to process the change and the transition and anything he might be worried about, you know, in that year and a half time. It just kind of makes me think about that, especially based on the fact some of the things that he says about that piece about I'll get up every day and breathe in and out. And eventually I won't have to think about getting up in the morning and breathing in and out. And it's such a good example of how overwhelming grief can feel and how heavy it can be in certain moments, especially right after something like that happens.
Mm-hmm. He definitely seems very emotionally healthy. Is what I would say for Sam. Like, he can talk about, like, in talking on the phone with that doctor, he didn't get angry and shut it down. You know, he didn't get overly emotional and start like weeping. Like, it was very just, this is my experience, you know, kind of honoring the way he was feeling without getting too caught up in it and in a way that wouldn't be helpful, or like subverting how he's feeling in a toxic way, like aggression or anger. And like you were saying too, Hannah, which I don't think is talked about enough societally, because we don't really recognize mental health as much as we should, is that sometimes you just have to be where you're at. And if all where you're at is just literally taking care of yourself, like taking care of your needs, as we might sometimes say, like sleeping, eating, exercise, doctor's orders, self-care, like sometimes that's all you can do. You can't really pursue higher goals, like, or higher functioning goals.
Right. Because you don't have the capacity, and that is okay.
And I like that he had the insight to know that that's where he's at. And also that moment it won't feel like that forever. Which kind of indicates he is on the, like, maybe on the outer edge of his grief, or at least this level of grief, or this potency of grief. And then also maybe he has seen somebody professionally.
I think he did. I mean, he had all those cards. He's like, I think that even in his moment of like, oh, look, another card. Someone else gave me something else to help me. That even having like another like male colleague go like, hey, here's my shrink. It wasn't you should go see somebody. It was here's my shrink. It was a recommendation. And I think that seeing that, I think that he's probably has seen somebody and is open to it. I think he was overwhelmed at that point and still in the bereavement point of like, yeah, thank you, but like everyone has given me these, and there's so many places to go. I don't even know where to start. Like all of these different options, or work will set you free, or talking will set you free, or group will help you. Like very, very bitter in that moment. But I think he probably did. I think his attitude towards getting help was healthy, just irritated that he got presented with so many options that all had conflicting philosophies, which gets really old really quick, especially when it's, oh, you're sad. Please don't be sad in my presence.
Yeah, because that's what it feels like, right?
Yep.
When somebody walks up to you and hands a card to you or says, maybe you should talk to somebody, I think sometimes it feels like that is like, I can't deal with you. I can't be the person you talk to. So I need you to talk to somebody else because I can't handle it. And even if that's not what people necessarily mean, I think that's how it's perceived. I think it's really hard to not perceive it that way.
Agreed. Well, I think people also perceive it as, oh, good. my sadness is so visible and palpable that it makes people have a disgusted reaction to the fact that, to the point that they feel like they need to come in and save me instead of just letting me have my sadness. They have to come save me from my feelings, and because it's so uncomfortable to them. And that is an issue.
I mean, I think people in these moments, they want to be treated normally, unless they are specifically asking for something else, or if they're close to you, at your workplace. I don't know if he feels if that's not the place to be having a conversation, or that's not the place where I'd assume he wouldn't feel like he'd want to have a conversation about his dead wife.
Correct. I think sometimes people want nothing more than to go back to being irrelevant.
Yes,
other people's lives. Sometimes it's like we all appreciate that. Like, what's the first thing that celebrities say that they miss is their anonymity. Like, people miss not being noticed, and there are some people who really would prefer that you treat them the same way you have always treated them, which was the same level of disregard for their life that you give to general public. And just because my wife died doesn't mean it's now time that we're going to be friends. Because you feel sorry for me. I don't want that. I don't like that. Please just leave me alone.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. Or the point of like wanting to change the environment of like going to work, right? Where like, again, that idea of I don't want to have these kinds of conversations with people at work, or this is not your in to tell me the story that you've been holding on to. That's not, that's not the place for this. It doesn't feel comfortable for me. And I think it goes back to the way our society in general deals with grief and deals with death, and that we push it to the side and we don't act like it's a big deal, and we act like people just need to get over it or whatever the fuck. And everybody has their own process for grieving. Everybody does. And they should be allowed and respected to have that grief and have that process however they need to have it.
Because like he approaches him, not to get too hung up on this one scene, but he approaches him like in the middle of an open office space, in the middle of what I assume is the work day at his desk. Like I guess this is advice for anyone listening. If you do feel like there's someone you kind of only know like acquaintance wise, or like you have like a sort of surface level relationship with, and you want to let them know that you're there for them, like send them give them a card that they can open whenever they want to open it, or like on the way outside of work, like, as they're walking to the car, go, hey, I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you if you need anything. I know we don't know each other very well, and then bounce. You know what I mean? Unless they pursue that conversation further. I think we're just, like you're saying, Hannah, we're just so freaked about death in this country that we have not learned at all how to deal with it, and so we just act like total spastics about death and other uncomfortable topics. But
yeah, absolutely,
we do. So was there anything that you guys saw in Sam that you didn't like?
I didn't like when he told Jonah to shut up, but I think that was just more two people stuck together in their, like, I think it's the part of being a single parent where you never really get a break from being a parent. Whereas that could have been a situation in the past where you would have like tag teamed with your partner. Like, I need to take a break. Like, can you go deal with whatever's going on with Jonah? And when you don't have that, I think you can lead to these moments where you kind of explode in a way that you're probably not proud of after the fact. And I would say there's a lot of feelings going on that I'm not surprised it came out that way. But I think that was the only time in the movie where I was not happy with him.
I think for me, the only thing I saw that I would have wanted to have gone differently, which would have been something to address in a family session with those two, which definitely I think would have been helpful, would be to talk about whether or not Jonah felt like Sam gave him enough preparation and enough conversation about starting to date, because I think that Sam took Jonah's phone call as an authorization to start dating. and then like just kind of started doing it and showed up with this woman.
I do think I agree with that actually. Now that you've tickled this thought,
right.
I agree that I think he introduces her. He incorporates, I can't even think of her name.
Victoria.
He incorporates her too quickly into their home life. I agree with that actually.
Yeah. And she shouldn't have met Jonah for quite a while. And I think that like Dad should have been doing some conversing with him about it and checking in with his feelings. And I think that Sam did not do an awesome job checking in with him about his feelings once Jonah started presenting with resistance to the situation. He started kind of at that point displaying more of like a bucket up kind of attitude where he was trying more of a more direct, tough love, bordering on like that more like traditional classic masculine role of, well, that's the way it is, so you're going to have to deal with it. And that I felt like was not healthy and not ideal when he had been doing so many things so well. And you can tell he's getting frustrated with it. And he would, in his, how long were you standing there conversation? It's like everybody in, the 90s is getting laid, but me, I don't want to get laid too, which, I get it. But the it would have been a good move for him to check in with Jonah once he started seeing that, maybe this wasn't as okay as I thought it was, that he made this call and started this process of me dating and seeing people, that he's having a reaction to it.
I think I totally agree. And I feel like something that would have been nice to see, although we know that the movie is not supposed to just be about their relationship, but that after he calls the restaurant, when Sam comes home and like the next day, that they talk about that they talk about what made you feel so anxious that you had to call me at the restaurant. Like, have a clarifying conversation about that. And do you feel scared that I'm gonna not have time for you? Do you feel scared that this woman, like any of those kind of, like, again, talking about those open-ended questions that we ask kids, to give them a chance, to give them a moment to communicate what they're feeling. Because especially a kid this age, I feel like they have connection to their feelings, and especially with all the other feelings communications that they've already had and already shown in the movie, that having that probably really could have really changed the outcome of that relationship in terms of him kind of acting out a little bit, like whenever Victoria is around.
Yep. I think that was a point where he really could have improved. He could have followed all those things like you're saying, and bringing the conversation to not this place of, well, this is what it is, deal with it, because that needs to be a part of it when you're transitioning to a new relationship. Like, kids need to understand that they don't get a vote in it necessarily, but his feelings still need to be acknowledged and addressed and processed through, because you can't just skip that part. And I feel like we try to skip that part in our country a lot. We just skip over the part of deal with the feelings part and process through and have the conversation, have the hard conversation about, what could be emotionally risky for both of you, going like, well, let's talk about why you're feeling sad or what you don't like about her. Cause I do like her and I'm interested in her. I'm going to keep seeing her until I don't, feel like it's working for me anymore. But we're not talking about her joining our family yet. So, we need to kind of balance that out, because it seems like you're kind of reacting to her like, I'm about to make her my wife, and hold on.
Which
I do think. Oh, go ahead, Hannah.
Okay. Which I feel like for someone who's 8, again, that clarification that he needed, because he just doesn't quite understand the difference between dating and having somebody be a part of your life. And I think that there's so many other good conversations in this that I think that is definitely a piece that he missed. But again, also points to a really good, healthy example of someone who has become a single parent, has gone through grief, is now prepared for dating, and has a misstep, like right away, kind of, right? Like, I think that would actually be a really natural thing that would happen, where, like, the first time you, like, I wonder how many single parents, the first time they start dating someone, introduce their kids to what they feel like is too quickly because they're just trying to figure out what feels okay. I think there's a piece of, my kid is a part of my life. I'm going to talk about them. You might as well meet them, because even if we're not, even no matter what happens with us, like this is most of my life is with this person that I love and care about, who's my child. So I think that it's kind of this hard decision to make. And also because I think also this sense of normalizing that there could be another relationship. And I also think that sometimes parents who are grieving, or parents who've gotten divorced, or whatever it might be, can be trying really hard to replace someone in their life, replace that role, not necessarily replacing like a new mom for him, but like of not having two parents. I think the guilt of that can be really, really hard to manage for a parent, whether or not it was through a tragic death or through divorce.
Yeah, I think jumping off of that, I do wonder, how much of it is like giving him a mom and that being just like a blank role, and doesn't matter really what the person's like to Jonah, because they'll just be a mom for him. Mm-hmm. And I do think that happens, and it's a lot more nuanced than that. And I do agree I could definitely see Sam thinking that Jonah's given him the all clear based on him being the pursuer of a relationship initially, and then saying, okay, so he's ready. And now I'm thinking about, am I ready? And I wonder, even with the conversation where he's talking about getting laid, when we're very sad, our libido can go down the toilet. Yep. Especially if we're missing someone that we're deeply in love with and can't imagine being with anyone else. And so I wonder, with the phone call with the psychiatrist and kind of where he's at with his grief, if that's kind of, he finally started entertaining the idea of dating somebody, and then it maybe lit up his libido again. And so I wonder if he's feeling an urgency there all of a sudden that he didn't feel before, and he's being a little too egocentrically driven by that urgency of, I'm now realizing how lonely I am and how horny I am and how ready I am to be with somebody and like to feel that part of myself again. Like this past year and a half, all I've been is a widower and a single dad. And now I'm ready to be like a boyfriend or a partner again. Right. And when we have those revelations, we can be a bit egocentric, not in a mean way. I think we're feeling it so intently that we can't see outside of it a little bit. And I think especially, I really can't get a sense of how much he actually likes Victoria, to be quite honest. But yeah, I wonder if it's that thing where you're so into somebody or the thought of somebody that it doesn't occur to you that other people can't like them. And if they don't like them, that's their problem. I've definitely come across that with friendships of like, yeah, of course this guy's great because you're in it, like in the first springs of love or like lust or whatever with that person. And so it doesn't occur to you that everyone else wouldn't be as like head over heels for them as you are, because you're kind of up your own romantic butt. Mm-hmm. And I will say, where I obviously wouldn't defer any ownership to Jonah because he is 8 years old. But I do think something that is kind of on his shoulders, which the radio psychiatrist really poignantly points out, was something because he calls the radio psychologist again. And he's like, my dad started dating and I flipping hate it. Like, it's garbage. Right. I hate this lady. What'd you say, Ben?
Oh, no, I just said, right. I agree. I think that the signs are clear.
Yeah. And so she says that very poignant thing of, sometimes we think, she said something along the lines of, sometimes we think we want something or we're ready for something, and then when it actually happens, we realize that we're not, which is such an insightful thing to say. I mean, we haven't really touched upon this yet, but the radio psychologist was pretty good. All of her feedback was pretty poignant. I wonder if Nora Ephron, the writer and director of this movie, has has a background in therapy, like maybe has seen a therapist, because they were, or at least ran this past a therapist, because all the interactions with the therapist were actually pretty realistic and well done and appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Right, or if that therapist was played by a real therapist.
Were they?
I don't know.
I think I recognize the voice. I feel like I can see the lady's head in my mind, even though we don't see her face. So I think it's an actress, because it sounded very familiar. Like I can see her in my mind's eye. But I did think that was an insightful thing that Jonah does have to wrestle with. Is I did kind of give my dad permission to date, and now I'm acting out. Like, even if he's so little, but I've seen clients as little as him and younger, and I could see myself, because he's such a well-spoken, smart kid and pretty emotionally intelligent kid, that I might even ask him that direct question, like, you started this journey with your dad, not in a way where I'd want to blame him, but I would probably ask a very similar question, like, you kind of gave your dad the go-ahead about this, and now it's happening, and it seems like you're having a really intense reaction to it. What do you think that's about? And see if he could put words to that.
Yep, I think that would be a good approach. I think the only thing I was disappointed with the therapist is that, unless I missed it, she didn't call for dad at that point. When,
true,
she's obviously been profiting off of this interaction with Sleepless in Seattle here, and using him as in their promos and everything else, which
true.
We'll take some issue with that. But
she's like an entertainment therapist.
I know. I mean, and people know that when they call, and they know they're not. I mean, they know they're talking to a therapist, but they know they're not getting like real therapy. They're calling for the quick and dirty. But I would have liked to have seen her go, "Where's your dad now? Let's have this conversation right now."
And I think if she was like a quote unquote real therapist, I hate to say it like that, that's what would happen. If I had a kid coming to me all of a sudden with all this energy, I'd be like, "Where's your dad at? Let's all have a conversation together."
I think she does say that right away. I think
the first time she does.
I think the second time she says right away, "Where is your dad?"
Does she?
Does she?
I do think she does. I mean, I think I pretty much know all the dialogue of this movie, which I realized last night. So I'm pretty sure she says, "Where is your dad?" And he says she's out, and he says he's on the deck with her right now.
Oh,
that's right.
Okay.
You're right. I'm wrong. You're right.
Yeah, Hannah has this whole script memorized, pretty much.
You're welcome.
So I'm wrong. I went on a rant for no reason. That's not the first time that's happened.
But yeah, I do think, and I think that is like the messiness of dating post this very specific kind of situation, when a parent is dating again, when they have underage children in the home, and even adult children, but definitely underage children, because this is a family adjustment, and it's going to impact the whole family. And so I do think kind of where you were going to, Hannah, with that is it is a tricky thought, like dilemma of when we introduce a kid into the mix, or the kid into the mix, and how do we do that? And people, in my even like anecdotal experience, like in life, not even necessarily as a therapist, but like with people I've known over the years, people tend to have very specific philosophies around that, like very concrete ideas. Either like, you don't meet my kids unless we're going to get legit married, or I introduce them right away to make sure that they're like them and my kid are like get along, or that my kid kind of co-signs on it. I tend to skew more on the wait a long time side, because then you end up having a kid who gets bonded over and over again to an adult that leaves them. And so you don't want your kid to be affected by sometimes the flippancy of dating, like that sometimes you date someone for 5 minutes and you think it's serious, and then it's not. And then sometimes you date for a little longer. But I would definitely argue with the longer. He definitely introduced Victoria way too soon.
Yep.
And honestly, the way that she acts, I don't think she really knows what she's getting into either. So I also think he didn't do a good job of really vetting her as someone who's not just ready to be a girlfriend, but to be like a stepmom.
Well, And I feel like the other piece that keeps playing over and over in my mind is the fact that Jonah calls and says, my dad needs a new wife. And again, that distinction of, I think he doesn't know what that means. He doesn't know the difference. And so for him
saying we need a solution is what he's saying.
Exactly. Like, my dad is sad. I don't want my dad to be sad anymore. He wasn't as sad when he was with my mom. Maybe he needs somebody to be with him. Like, I mean, he's
not even saying I need a mom. He's saying my dad needs a wife.
My dad needs a wife. Exactly. He's not saying that he needs a mom. So again, just like, I know that I'm really picking apart what the kid is saying, but that with a kid that age, you really
concrete like that.
Yeah, they're concrete like that. So picking that up and again, maybe a point for Sam to have had that conversation with him of like, what do you think a wife is? What do you think a wife does? Like, what do you feel like me having a wife would be like? What do you think would be different about if I had a wife? Like, there's so many different ways to help, again, with the clarifying. This is what we do. This is how we understand each other. We clarify, we check, and we ask things that we don't, when we're not sure, we ask those questions. And we also, and part of one of the biggest things about communicating with kids is understanding what do they think they're saying?
Yeah.
Do they think that they're saying that I need a new mom? Do they think that they're saying, oh, dad is sad, I want him to have a girlfriend, but I don't want the girlfriend to have anything to do with me. I just want it to have to do with dad. Like, there's so many different ways that a kid could mean wife. There's so many different meanings for that word. That again, clarifying with kids of like, well, what did you think that meant? Or what does that mean to you? Or what does it feel like to say that about me? Like, there's just so many different ways to clarify questions with kids. And I think that even though I wish you would have had that conversation, I still think it's a really good example of someone who is, who respects their kid and respects them as a human who has feelings and thoughts, and that he's not perfect either, but that he at least has a pathway to communication with his son.
I agree. So I feel like we've hit this relationship pretty hard, and I think we've done a really good job with it. What about the other side? The other movie we're watching? Because this is... Yeah,
it really feels like two movies that were smooshed together. I keep forgetting Meg Ryan's in this movie as we're talking about it. I keep thinking this is the whole movie. Is Sam and Jonah and figuring out like how to grow together through their grief. Because I guess one thing about the Jonah thing is, why do you guys think he gets hyper fixated on her, Annie, Meg Ryan's character? Like, to the point that he flies across country, which is terrifying. Like, he's a driven kid. He's a very driven kid.
Well, he also is friends with a girl whose parents are like travel agents. So I feel like that really does help.
She gets rid of a lot of obstacles.
Call that a MacGuffin, ladies and gentlemen.
But I wonder if that's just like the magical thinking of a little kid. Like, I don't like this woman, but I think I like this woman, and she'll be the fix. Like, we met Victoria. I don't like her. I'm having a reaction that I was not prepared for or expecting. So I'm just going to keep swiveling and looking for like the other solution. So I think my dad still needs a wife, but I hate this person. So maybe it has to be a specific wife. And so I'm going to go through these letters, and then I'm going to hyperfixate on the solution because I don't feel comfortable. So instead of learning how to sit in his discomfort and endure the natural consequences of, I've opened the barn door of my dad dating, I'm going to hyperfixate on this woman who is, we're about to rip her apart.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I watched it last night. I feel like Brittany indicated she was anticipating a response from me that she got, but I was just like watching this and going like, so we're going to be talking about how this is emotional cheating and stalking, right? Because this is bananas. And they're like, Hannah or Brittany was like, yeah, we were just watching it and thinking about like how great it was to watch, Tom Hanks and Jonah. I forgot his name already. Sam and Jonah, and like had a great father-son relationship. And as I'm watching this with my wife, I'm sitting there like, This woman is cheating on this man this entire relationship. She is not involved. She is not invested. She is doing things that are terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I guess let's get into it. This part is what makes me sad because I love this movie. I almost wish, can someone edit this movie for us where it's just the Tom Hanks parts and then we just act like Meg Ryan's not in this movie? It's like that movie Julia, the Julia Child movie with Amy Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has edited that where they take all the Amy Adams bits out and it's just like an hour-long movie about Julia Child, and I love that, and I've watched that more than I've watched that
because
movie. So I would like
Stanley friggin' Tucci plays her husband.
Second episode in a row talk about how hot Stanley Tucci is.
I can't do with that. I want to talk about it.
So I would like someone to do that for me. Mm-hmm. Just Sleepless in Seattle. Just the Sleepless in Seattle part, not the cuckoo Meg Ryan bits.
That's the clinical term for that is cuckoo-ness. But yeah, I mean, we need to talk about her and how much of a terrible example for this being like one of the gold standard rom-coms to everybody in everybody's minds. When you think of rom-com, Sleepless in Seattle comes up to people's minds. But I watched this and I was like, this woman is terrifying.
Yeah, if you want to watch a good Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan vehicle, watch You've Got Mail to see people actually genuinely fall in love in a very real way. This, as I was watching with Hannah, I was like, I turned to Hannah and I was like, did they even talk to each other in this movie? Like,
for real.
Meg Ryan.
No, they do not. Like, other than like they hold hands, which was the whole thing of the whole magic thing, which, like a good job filmmakers on tying your thing together and then throwing in some real bad 90s CGI. But like this behavior that you're showing of like this being the gold standard, I'm like watching this and going like, really? This is the one we think about when we think about a rom-com. This is the one we want to do. Okay, this is the one where I warned you in the beginning I was going to be an antagonist because I absolutely hated everything that Meg Ryan did.
Yeah, so let's just get into it. So as we've already said up top and again, she is I don't even know what her deal is.
She's not well. Yeah.
She's not well.
She's not well.
The way that we kept talking about it before we started recording is Hannah kept saying she does not know who she is. And I think that's a very accurate jumping off point for what's going on with her character.
I think that she is not happy with her life. She is not happy with her partner. She's settling. We're seeing what it looks like when someone settles and keeps dreaming about something else and living another life. But it is not healthy to put all of those thoughts and feelings into a designated other person. Like, it is perfectly healthy to wonder could I have this with someone else? That's healthy to
Absolutely.
wonder, to think this relationship that I have, nah, this ain't doing it for me. But to be talking to other people, but to get to a point where you are putting all of your hopes and dreams into a person you have not met, to the point where you are going to start stalking them, that's not healthy.
Actually a thought that just came to my mind. Well, two thoughts. One is in the brief conversation that occurs between Annie and her brother, played by David Hyde Pierce, it's very clear that there's like some repression or some like there's an interesting dynamic there where I forget exactly what he's saying. Hannah, you can let me know since you know beat for beat this movie and its dialogue. Something about their conversation made me really want to know more about their family life and like why are they both seem so repressed or at least so disconnected from like this is how life is. Like you don't really feel thrilled, you don't really feel a lot of emotion, and it's weird for you to start entertaining the idea that there could be more fulfillment in life.
Yeah, and I think I think what you're referring to is when she comes in the door and says, this is normal. I have cold feet. Like that's what this is. And she's like, when did you know that your wife was the one? And he's like, she told me that either we had to break up or get married, and so we got married. Like, and that's all. Like there isn't any like passion or like and not passion in like he had to like tell her a fucking love story about what happened, but just like there was no it felt very, very detached. I mean, for lack of a better way to say it, it felt like a very detached response of, I am just doing what everybody is supposed to be doing. You're supposed to get married. We're supposed to have a kid. That's the path that I'm on, but
Right.
not a sense of ownership or a sense of connectedness to that person. And again, also, I'm a fucking marriage and family therapist. Like, I know that relationships are not fucking roses and rainbows all the time, but just the lack of feeling behind his answer, I think, is what it was. Just, it does make me wonder, what is their family life like?
Well, and especially with like their mom being the mom had that really like meaningful conversation about the serendipitous nature of her relationship. Or was that grandma? I thought that was her mom that was having this.
That's what I was gonna. That was what I was gonna bring up. Sorry to talk over you, Ben. That was what I was gonna bring up as well. And this might just be like, I love Nora Ephron. I think the Sam and Jonah part is like so well written and well done. Like, and she wrote Harry Met Sally, which is a masterpiece, and all of these movies that I love. But I feel like it doesn't make sense writing wise or like story wise for their mom to be so romantic seeming and her story to be so romantic, and then to have two kids who grow up and are so passionless, or at least they're so normalized to passionlessness. Like, I would feel like she would have to be someone who's like a whole like waspy, repressed family where you just like, you marry out of convenience or you marry for like security. And it's weird to think there could be more. Like, it feels like Meg Ryan is breaking the social rules of the family when she talks to her brother. Like, the way he reacts, he's like, what are you doing? Like, you're not playing, like, you're not like following our religion anymore. Like, that's how it kind of struck me during that conversation. It's like she's black sheeping out of her family, but her mom doesn't sell that in the beginning. It's just a weird setup for that dynamic.
Well, and I feel like also at the same time, the mom is waspy enough to not even say the word sex. I mean, like, she fucking flutters around the word fucking, like she can't talk about having sex with her adult daughter,
who's probably at least kissing 30, if not over 30.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Thinking she's still a virgin.
Vicinity. Right. They know. And I think it doesn't make sense. I mean, I guess it does if you factor in kind of like the waspiness of what would have been growing up in the 60s, 70s, and kind of where the parents' culture would have been at that time versus where the kids' culture would have been. But it doesn't click, as like you guys are saying. Like, how did this person who comes from this marriage of people that were so, at least at one point in time, into each other that they just knew, to then think that she needs to be in this relationship that everything makes sense for, but she's not feeling.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, yeah, my second thought that I had with that is, it's almost like she's behind developmentally, Annie, like in the like romantic sexual sense. It's like she just discovered that she could be horny, and then or that she could feel excited or like connected to this, because she has a big strong emotional reaction to the conversation. She hears Sam talking about his wife, she starts crying in her car. It's like that wakes something up inside of her, and she doesn't know what to do with that feeling now. And it's very kind of reminiscent of when developmentally, when we are like teenagers and we sort of start to realize our bodies, and now we're into like whatever sex, like whatever gender we're attracted to, and we don't really know what to do with ourselves, and we act like fools, and we do weird stuff like show up at people's houses and like, or write them love letters. Like, she's behaving in a way that you would see in a teenager who just discovered romance and doesn't know what to do with all those big feelings. But she is a full adult person with a job and a fiance and like a house and everything. So it's just so bizarre. It does. She feels like she's just behind developmentally, now that I'm like thinking that all the way through.
She does. And now that you say that, like, I also like psychologically it doesn't make sense, because she seems to have a secure attachment style.
Yeah.
Not an insecure attachment. behaviors would make more sense with someone with an insecure attachment style, or a person who came up with a chaotic family with a chaotic attachment style where it wasn't clear. And it doesn't make sense that she would be ascribing all of these hopes and dreams into this person she never met, that she's connecting to on the radio, to the point that she takes as extreme steps as she does. To have it just be like a wonder, a curiosity, you connect with someone emotionally, you hear on a radio show or a TV show or whatever, and you go like, wow, I wonder what it would be like to be with them. It sounds like we're very similar. That's normal. We all do that. But to be at the point where I'm willing to take extreme action on it, like start Googling this person and where they live and whatever version of Google they had then, and then hiring a private investigator.
Private detectives were Google.
To take pictures of this man and to find out more about him and to do a criminal background check on him, and then to go see him and go to his house and see what he does with his child. And when you find out that he's out on the porch or whatever, to be looking and seeing what he's doing, and I'm just like, what is going on? This is not healthy. That is not okay. And it doesn't make sense that someone who grew up in a securely attached family would kind of make those choices.
Yeah, it's very, because kind of what you were saying, Ben, is it's very normal and actually wonderful to have epiphanies. Like, I wish it would have stayed as an epiphany. Like, it sounds like that listening to his conversation and feeling very connected to him and like that waking up the romance in her is an epiphany. And I've seen people have epiphanies in my office. It's so beautiful and so cool. And it can really like change who you are at like a nuclear level. It's like you've unlocked your brain.
Yes.
And you're in galaxy brain mode. And where she,
we're going to have to explain that one.
Okay. Galaxy brain
mode. I know exactly.
Well, that's like,
I mean,
it's
I know
a
she means
meme, Ben.
too, but like it. What?
It's just that thought of like,
it's a clinical term.
I myself old man today.
No, it's that meme where people like grow like into their revelations until they reach galaxy brain, which is like the most revelatory you can feel about something.
Oh, that one where like you're seeing like it's the brain started. Oh, okay, I didn't know it's called galaxy brain. I know what meme.
Yeah.
About.
You need to get on TikTok. I don't know how many times I can tell you, Ben, that you need to get on TikTok. You need to get on TikTok.
Make your own fucking account. Yes, but I have Brittany, which is why I know what TikTok is. And I listen to her when she tells me. Yes, Brittany is my teenager. When I don't understand something that a teenage client tells me, I fucking ask her about it.
What I wish Rosie O'Donnell would have done in this movie is, instead of keeping Annie's character focused on Sam, would have said focus more on like, it seems like something's really going on for you. Like, it seems like you're feeling new things, like you're feeling yourself or you're feeling something. You're not super happy with Walter. Like, I wish she would have done more, but this is also in her role. She's not a therapist. She's her friend. Like, so I don't expect her to also be this like self-aware and insightful and like play this part with her. But I wish that she would have focused more on like what's going on for you, not necessarily with this dude.
I mean, I wish she wouldn't have sent the fucking letter. That would have been fucking helpful. That bitch sent the letter.
Yep.
Like that. And I think, and that feels, and again, it's the story, whatever Becky had, her name is Becky. That's Rosie O'Donnell's. I looked it up. Mm-hmm. Like that was her role or whatever to kind of reinforce this idea or this behavior, but that it's so, but that she's not a good friend. Side note, Becky's not a good friend.
No,
I will say the one thing
tells you to go do something crazy. That is not good. That's not good. Please don't. Public service announcement coming from Popcorn Psychology here. If your friend tells you they're going to do something crazy, tell them not to.
I would say, and this is also one of those things, it's like the Meg Ryan part of this movie just doesn't add up, because I would say also with the Rosie O'Donnell character, Becky, she does very appropriately say, which is like she almost gets there with her, where she goes, you want to be in love, like love in a movie. Like she really kind of touches upon like the almost delusional, well, not almost, the delusional nature of what's going on with Meg Ryan, which is you are projecting all these romantic ideas onto this dude who does not even know you exist. You don't even know that, like, he's wanting this. It's his son who's doing this. And he's very clearly, that when she gets that response letter, it's so clearly written by an 8-year-old. I wouldn't be surprised if it was done in crayon.
Well, and also I feel like the fact that Becky, again, not being a good friend, does I just lost my train of thought. But does the thing where it's like, oh, but maybe this, or maybe he's just not good at writing. It's like, no, like, we don't have to make up a story around what this letter is. It is what it is. This letter sounds friggin' bananas. Why would you take it seriously? Like the letter doesn't sound like an adult person wrote it right away. Like,
it's because she's in her fantasy and she's just looking for things for confirmation bias. Like, she's looking for things that fit her fantasy because she's needing this story and she's needing the drama of the romance of, like, the whole magical realism of the story, because she's going through, I would imagine, like, an existential crisis. She's realizing that the life that she set up for herself isn't the life that actually she wants. And I think she does do a lot for how warm she does come off. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that's masking. And the term masking, if you're not familiar, is when you sort of, it sounds like what it is. Like, you put on a mask or a facade or a persona with people that isn't true to you. And it usually takes a lot of energy to, like, because people who do a lot of masking, it's like all day you're thinking about, you're not being natural. You're thinking like, okay, should I laugh here? Okay, should I put my hand on their arm? Like, they seem kind of sad. Should I be kind of sad? It's like you are manually breathing all day. And so I wonder if because she does so much, like, what I consider, like, anxious laughing throughout the movie, like this very, like, chit chatty, like it's very, it makes me wonder how much of that's her real personality and how much of that is the personality that she's cultivated, that maybe she's just tired. Because I think also a common existential point that she could be at is, which we've touched upon, is I've done everything right and I still don't feel something. Like, it's like her mom bringing up that spark in the beginning of the movie when she was trying on the wedding dress, like, was like a little earworm that crawled into her head and then planted this whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, and it did. There's no doubt that happened, and that she is absolutely in an existential crisis. And having compassion for that is important, and recognizing that sometimes people do weird things with that, but not encouraging that or using that as an example of, like, the most romantic thing you can do is where I draw the line of going, like, well, this is one of the most romantic movies ever. Like, watching her made me so profoundly uncomfortable in so many ways, because, like, it's dangerous, it's delusional, it's creepy, and it's stalking. And none of those are healthy behaviors. Like, how are you going to be telling your story to friends at the, like, oh yeah, I flew to Seattle and I followed him around, and I followed him and his kid around, and then I saw his sister come. I didn't know it was his sister at the time, and I thought, oh, that's his girlfriend. And then I almost got hit by a truck, and then he saw me and we said hi right before I almost got hit by a taxi in the middle of a state I had no business being in, that I lied to my fiance about where I was and said I was on a work trip. Like, wow, that story starts to sound super crazy.
That story just sounds so disconnected from reality. Like, every single fucking time, I've probably seen this movie 20,000 times, like, legit. Every time she walks up to that house, I'm always like, what is this bitch gonna say? What are you gonna say? You don't know him? Like, how the fuck did you get his address? What was the, you know what I mean?
Is she gonna say, I got your letter? Well, the letter was after that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to knock? What are you going to knock on that door and say that's going to be the most awkward, uncomfortable conversation, and you are going to scare this man?
Oh yeah, where you're going to be like, I'm here because I heard you on the radio. Like, what?
And I think we said a few words at the same time.
So now I think that I want to see if we should be together, even though I'm engaged and literally know nothing about you. Also, I followed you around all day today.
Yeah, that's not okay.
Jesus.
Because also,
romantic,
like,
it's creepy.
A very clear sign that she's not she doesn't know him, is that if she knew him, she would realize that actually he's talking a lot of shit about all the women that are writing letters. Like, he's really blatantly making fun of them, which was pretty on point. Like, I'd probably do the same thing. But he's like not into it. He's not into this, like, being this person and getting this attention. Like, it does get him to start dating, but he doesn't start like this movie doesn't have that classic montage where he goes on a bunch of wacky dates with all these women writing into him, which could have easily happened in a different movie.
Oh yeah.
No.
He's not interested in dating these women. He's very detached from that part of this movie.
This man is an introvert. He is an introvert. Yeah. This is what an introvert looks like. He is not someone who's like going out and being gregarious and making friends everywhere he goes. He is kind of into his own business. He's into his own family. He's into his own stuff, and he's kind of cautious about who he engages with. Mm-hmm. And he's a little awkward with people. And well, I mean, sure, it's not like being an introvert is a bad thing, but this man is an introvert. This is not somebody you're going to walk up to and be like, "Hi, I heard you on the radio," and he's going to be like, "Really? Tell me more about myself, please." He's going to be like, "Why the fuck are you at my house? Get the fuck out of here."
And what's disheartening about this movie is that it rewards all this behavior.
Absolutely.
By them, it literally happening. Like, magically, he sees her, like, he gets like starry.
And they hold hands and they get together.
And they hold hands and they literally do not talk. It is crazy making when you really watch it, really thinking about it.
Well, and the other thing is that it like creates this narrative that we see in these rom-coms and all kinds of movies all the time, is that if you're not feeling your relationship, it's okay to go explore other ones while you still keep the other person on the hook. And that is emotional cheating. And I'm going to like turn up on that a little bit, because I see this in sessions often where people don't seem to understand until they blow up their relationship that if you go onto dating sites while you are in a relationship, or you are talking to people, other women, other men, whoever, and having an emotional connection to them that is definitely not a friendship, like, you're talking to these people who would have sex with you if you said, "I wanted to have sex with you," then it is not a friendship. Like, the knowing you're in a relationship, like all that kind of like caveats to it, but and they know that this is more than a friendship. This is not just innocent, like talking to people on a general talk. You are talking to people on dating sites. If you are engaging in emotional divulgence of your personality that should be being shared with your partner, you are committing emotional cheating and you are damaging your relationship. And we see her doing that, and she starts detaching from him. I mean, she's detached from him anyway, but as she's detaching from Walter further and further, and he even makes a comment about how detached she's been, which is why I think he accepts her breaking up without fighting with her too much. I mean, he's kind of a wet noodle anyway, but watching still, like, you see people go through this pattern over and over again where they start feeling discontent with their relationship, and instead of placing energy into solving their relationship or figuring out and giving it the appropriate attention that maybe this isn't for me and I need to step away from this relationship, they start looking for something else and trying to find the answers in someone else to see if they feel something or see if something else does something. And that is not okay.
And it also and it
go ahead, Anna.
Okay.
Sorry.
And that's okay. And it also isn't an accurate representation of what a healthy relationship would be, right?
No.
So
it's not real.
When you have a relationship that you're currently in, and then you start seeking out something else, that something else is not going to be the same because you're still in this relationship. Like, and I feel like, and this might be a big thing to say, but I don't really fucking care. Like, just have the hard fucking conversation of saying, I know that I said that I would marry you. I'm starting to feel like I don't know if that's in our best interest. And I don't know how I really feel about that. Would it be okay if, like, we just took a step back and like maybe didn't plan anything. Would you mind going to couples therapy? Or like, I think I might see a therapist. Like there's so many, and she doesn't even have to say that, but even just having the conversation of, I don't feel as connected to you. I don't feel as connected to you. I don't know if there's something going on with me. There's something going on with our relationship, but I wanted to let you know because I didn't want to have to hold on to that by myself. And that is a very healthy response to letting somebody know this is what's going on, because this would be a completely different movie. Maybe not. Maybe it'd be the same. But how different would this be if she would have had that conversation with him? Because
it'd be at least 40% different.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe like she still does some very inappropriate, not okay things. Like regardless of anything, the way that she gets his information, the way that all of that happens is completely unacceptable, illegal. It's so many things. But the idea, when I talk to couples or individuals even about emotional cheating, it's getting a need met someplace else.
Right.
And what that means is if you're getting that need met someplace else, then you are not giving your partner a chance to fill that need because you're no longer looking for it in them, which means not only are you not giving them a chance, but you're automatically assuming that they can't give it to you even if you did ask. And then you're hoping that somebody else will give it to you, and yet you're not interested in letting your partner know.
Right.
And that's kind of exactly what I was going to hit upon, Hannah.
Sorry.
Is maybe, no, you're fine. Part of remote recording, you guys, is it's harder to like not jump all over each other, like just because of lag. But I would say, and maybe I read this wrong, so you guys can correct me if you read it differently, is I feel like this movie kind of tries to make Walter, her fiance, not a bad guy because he's not a villain or anything, but like he's the reason why she's in this like nerd dork relationship. Like he's such a dork. He's allergic to everything. He needs to sleep with a humidifier next to their bed and wear like full pajamas and all this stuff. But like as seen in the conversation they have when they break up, is he actually is a bit more like confident and assertive and self-possessed than they make him seem to be. And I don't think it's fair of this movie, if this is what they were trying to do, to like put blame on him for how the relationship's been. Because I'll tell you what, she's just as much of a dork as he is. And I bet you, and she's wearing that, I mean, this is very 90s, but like that long, like grandma nightgown that everyone seemed to wear, including like Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld. So I can't really besmirch Meg Ryan for that, because that was a look back then. Unfortunately, everyone was wearing like bed sheets all the time.
The 90s was so unfortunate fashion wise.
Just so many layers and just so much fabric
just
all the
bad,
time.
Just bad.
Just do you want to know what a human body looks like?
Nobody knows what
Um,
it looks like. It's fucking draped in God only.
We haven't seen a silhouette in 10 years.
Pleats and fucking vests.
That's why when like 99, 2000 came out with like, like the flared jeans and like all the low rise and all that stuff, and all, like everybody was like, oh yes, that. Mm-hmm. Thank you, more. And women were like, no more. But these terrible clothes that everyone was wearing before, everyone looked like they put their arms and legs through a Kleenex box and went, this is close now.
Yeah. But so I think like with that thought is that I feel like they're in this situation, this like sexless, boring relationship is as much her fault as his, if not maybe even more hers, because there was clearly something like not switched on with her in terms of her awareness of her needs. And so like you were saying, Hannah, I really wish this movie would have been just two stories happening parallel to each other, where they kind of have this weird impact point of his conversation on the radio lit something in her, and then she went through a thing of self-discovery just like he's going through one with dating, but they never end up together. Like I don't think they needed to end up together.
No,
because it makes no goddamn sense when you really think about it. And
not at all.
I wish that instead of, maybe she would have even like wrote him a letter and maybe even did weird stuff, but I wish the end of it would have been her talking to Walter and being like, this is what I'm just figuring out that I need now. I don't necessarily want to break up with you, and I do need us to have this conversation about, like, can you meet these needs? This is what and I'm sorry that I wasn't clear about this leading up to this point. Like, because in a way you could argue that she was misleading him too, and so she owes him that too, as well, of like, I'm realizing I'm a different person than I thought I was. And I don't know if you'll even like this person, or want to be in a relationship with this person. Can we figure that out? And like, go to counseling together. And then if that doesn't work out, then you decide to break up. But the fact that she doesn't, this is what makes me like so frustrated as well. When you, like what you're talking about, Hannah, when people like step out, even emotionally, is that you're not even trying to put that energy towards a relationship you're in, like the way that she hides in. And then it's also like, if you feel like you have to hide in the pantry of your kitchen, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong.
She friggin' lied to where she was going she went on a plane someplace else. Like, it's just all of that hiding, all in that sense that she has to hide. All of those pieces are just indicators and friggin' alarms that this is something that you don't actually feel comfortable doing, and certainly don't feel comfortable telling your partner about. And again, that sense of not giving Walter a chance. And there is a part of me, and I know that I don't want to talk a bunch about Walter because he's not on the schedule. But also a piece of me also just wonders, where the fuck was his head at? Because it seemed like she was trying pretty hard to prove to her family that she was in love with him, and that he was the one for her. Like
she's trying to sell Walter a lot to family.
Yeah, which I don't think is necessarily uncommon when we introduce, the person that we're in love with to a family. But in some way, it just felt so disingenuous. Like it just didn't feel natural, the way that she was acting, and kind of like, again, somebody who doesn't know who the fuck she is.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that she doesn't really know who he is, and that they're not really a good fit, but they're going through this dog and pony show to sell everybody on that, and to present this thing to assuage others, and mostly themselves. Because if you show up with somebody that makes you happy, your family can see it and feel it.
Yeah.
And they know. And like, I think the thing that I want to like tag onto this too is that when we're talking about like this kind of fantasy relationship she's having in her head with this man she'd not met, is one of the things that people do is they create this false experiment where they invest that kind of attention and infatuation and interest into, if they're not getting it from the relationship that they're in, they start investing it somewhere else. And when somebody starts giving it back, they start turning and leaning into that. But they never gave their partner the indication that they were feeling that way, or an opportunity to fix the things that were wrong. And then they create this false experiment. Well, see, I'm definitely not getting this here, but now I can get this over here. And getting into some kind of lie with them, and delusion with themselves that everything's going to be perfect if I just walk away from this relationship. And that's not necessarily true.
Exactly. Well, I think it gives. Sorry, Ben, finish.
We're good. I'm finished. I was just going to rant, probably. So go ahead. I don't know where I was going.
It just gives such a false sense of what another relationship could be like.
Right.
Because this is unlike, again, that there's parts of intrigue and being excited about having a relationship that no one else knows about. Like, there's so many things that aren't a part of creating like a healthy relationship. And that was so interesting too. I was thinking a couple of different things, but what's so interesting about this is that there's a lot of parallels, right, that they draw to An Affair to Remember. I don't know if either one of you have seen that movie. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what's interesting about An Affair to Remember is that they both come back from this trip where they met each other, and they both break up with their partners and make a plan to be together in 6 months. Now, I'm not saying what they did on the ship or whatever was like super great, but they do stop what they're doing so that they can be together. They tell their partners, I've met somebody else. Like, I can't do this. I'm not in love with you. And I want to do this other thing. And so even the movie that they're like, going after, or like making the movie, making this movie be connected to, did something that was healthier than what she did. And I think the other thing that popped into my head that I feel like I've been talking to people a lot about lately is this sense of meeting a goal instead of making sure that your goals match your values. So we meet a goal because everybody gets married. Let's just say that that's what the goal is. Everybody gets married. It's something I have to do, something I want to make sure I do. It's a goal I want to hit. And that goal ends up being something that isn't as connected to who you are. Not that everybody gets married and it's like for a bad reason or something, but just more because what is the most important thing to you? And how do you make your life match your values versus having these notches that you meet and may or may not feel? That's why I think sometimes we hit these goals, kind of like what she did, probably getting engaged, hit this goal of getting engaged and expecting to feel this sense of accomplishment or the sense of, now I know where my life is going. Now I have this plan. I'm doing the thing that everybody else said that I needed to do or that I always thought that I would do. And why isn't it making me feel happy?
Yeah.
It's not making you feel happy because, well, number one, she doesn't know who the fuck she is. So she doesn't even know what she wants in the first place. So trying to make sure that you can have goals. There's nothing wrong with having goals, but make sure that you figure out what your values are so that your goals match up with your values. Otherwise, you're going to hit those goals and they're not going to feel the sense of accomplishment that you thought you would.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're not. And then that often leads to this fantasy life of living like what we see her actually acting out, living that in your mind, and then resenting your partner because they're not that idealized person you've either created in your mind or actually identified like we see in this film. And then you don't put the effort into making the relationship you have better or getting out of it. Either way is okay. You don't have to stay in a relationship, or you can determine that it's not worth trying to fix the relationship. You can make that choice. That is okay. You're not doing anything wrong if you decide this is not working. But where it becomes wrong is if you hold on to that one to see if the other thing you're looking at works, and then it's time to let that one go. You don't get to do that one. You have to decide that I'm either going to try to make this one work and it doesn't work, or it's just not going to work and I need to move on. And what I don't like about rom-coms is that they so often go through this process of starting this other relationship while they're in a relationship. And they always go through this trope of showing why the other person is so wrong for them. And then they find this other person who's so right. And it just perpetuates this problem fantasy that people fall into all the time.
Isn't the movie The Baxter about the Walter in this situation? Like the Walter of romantic comedies. Have you guys ever seen The Bachelor? The Baxter?
No.
I have no idea.
I have no idea what you're
It's a
talking
Michael. It's like the people who do Wet Hot American Summer. So it's that director, David, I can't think of his last name, and Michael Showalter is the Baxter. And it's basically a rom-com being told from the perspective of the guy who gets left.
Of course, that would be what they would do.
And I haven't seen it in a long, long time, so I might not be articulating it like perfectly, but I'm pretty sure that's the premise of it. Because it's like these fictional characters who are also real people, in these scenarios, in real life, are just they've become like a side. They just become like a plot point in a person's story, which is so deeply unfair. Because I would also say, too, I know this movie is leaning into like the magical realism of their, I guess, soulmates. Like they're putting those little they're dropping those little petals throughout the movie that they're soulmates because they I don't know. But there is no world in the real. I mean, I guess it could happen. There is a slim percentage it could work out. And I would argue that when you put all this fantasy onto a person and then you're actually with that person, you've almost doomed it from the start. Because if this person isn't the person you have already decided they are, that's going to cause so much like cognitive dissonance and resentment. Because I think she's thinking of him. I would assume she's thinking of him as this like deeply romantic person because of how he talked about his wife on the radio show. And I think because we've watched him, like he's very sweet and was in love with his wife, it seems like very deeply, and is very articulate, and like he makes fun of Affair to Remember. He is a pretty rough guy, like the way he talks with Jonah, and he's very frank and pragmatic and more on like the jokey side, very much more on the jokey side. And so he's an average dude. He's just a general dude. Yeah, and so who he is and who she heard, like that wasn't a good representation of what he actually is like on the day-to-day.
No, she projected her fantasies onto this man's life. And like people do that in these, like I know people who have gotten into these traps that these movies create for us. And like some people have defined what a healthy like relationship, a fairy tale romance looks like by fairy tales and rom-coms and things like this that show such a distorted, unhealthy version of what a healthy relationship is, that they almost create a bias in your head that when normal guys act like he does, the actual version of Sam in this movie, that they're not the, Ryan Gosling from The Notebook dude who loves them so much, so no matter what, like the Nicholas Sparks kind of guy. And like it creates this setup where people aren't ever going to be that and can't ever be that because they're whole real people, not characters.
But at least in The Notebook, they dated as teenagers. Like they had a history and a foundation of which their adult relationship was built upon, and not this where it's literally nothing. And I think what's also, I'm just going to say it, irresponsible about this movie is that they create a false connection between her and Jonah, and to kind of make that okay as well, because we don't know anything about her in terms of like having kids, or like she's maybe in love with Sam or in love with the idea of Sam, but is she in love with the idea of being a stepmom to a kid who's like still kind of going through it? You know what I mean? And so that's also irresponsible as well, is this idea that like she's maybe not well, and she's going to be a part of this little sweet little boy's life who's needing whose dad's done a really good job creating a lot of stability for him. And now they're going to introduce this bomb that is Meg Ryan's character. And like I said, and by like making this false narrative that they're also connected, like soulmate almost, like he picked her out of a stack. And that's not responsible. So that is, I hate to see it in this movie. Because she's thinking like you're saying, Ben, she's thinking she's going to live a fairy tale. She's stepping into a very complicated family dynamic of a blended family. And that's going to take, because even if Jonah really liked her, he's still going to have, I think, hard feelings. And dating a widower is a complicated thing. Like, it's not just, oh, I'm what they need and we're going to find. Like, it's only been a year and a half, maybe closer to 2 years at this point in the story. But still, the holidays are still like the only second Christmases or second birthdays or that we don't have her. And so it's still going to be complicated. And I hope that, and I just feel like where she's at developmentally, I don't think she's ready to process through complicated. She's just not mature. I hate to say it. She's just not mature, and definitely not mature enough for this, because you have to really have your head on straight to go into this dynamic. Like, you have to be a pretty centered, grounded person. You can't be introducing all your existential bullshit into a single parent and their kid. It's like I hate the movie Jerry Maguire, but it is like that thing where he talks about you can't just fuck around with single moms. You have to know what you're doing. You when you decide to date a single mom, you have to be committed. And I think it's the same thing with obviously a single dad. Any single parent is, you can't fuck around. Well,
and you also have to know that this person may not want to have children outside of the children he had from his first marriage. He may feel like that would be a betrayal to his past marriage, that like moving on would be okay, that his wife would want that, but that he's not willing to start another family.
Or that he's just done having kids because he already had his kid.
Right. I mean, we don't know where she's at with kids because she doesn't mention it at all the whole movie. But, assume that might be something she might want. That, these are things that I guarantee she spent 0% of her time thinking about.
She was just zeroed in on if once I find this guy. I mean, it's very like where Jonah's at, and he's 8. It's like once I find this guy, everything else is just going to fall into place. Is she going to relocate? Where's her job situation at? Like,
doesn't she work?
Her whole family seems like live in Baltimore.
She works for the Baltimore Sun, and hopefully her ass is getting fired for using inappropriate use of services. All the shit that she uses in order to get his information.
There was no way to track that shit in 93.
I just shut up, Ben. You know what I mean. You know this bitch should get fired.
So I will say this. I feel like we are shifting into final thoughts. I think we've been kind of filtering in our final thoughts throughout, but should we touch on treatment before we just fully launch into this movie? Like, and what we think about it?
I mean, I'll start with treatment. I think that of all the people in this film, the person I would want to be treating would most definitely be Annie. Because I think that she is the person I see who has the most obvious and most significant psychological struggles going on. I think that doing existential work with her and in doing also some straight up CBT work with her, cognitive behavioral therapy, working on understanding the connection between thoughts, feelings, and emotions, or thoughts, feelings, and actions. So thoughts, feelings, behaviors, right? To connect all three of those together to recognize where she is having an existential crisis, meaning the same fears that we all process and deal with that are part of being alive, of which being alone, being irrelevant, fear of death, all of these things are fears that we all have. And she's starting to experience those and deal with like essentially a quarter life crisis at this point of realizing everything she's setting up for herself is not feeling right. But everything she does to deal with that is done on such a bananas premise to solve that problem that I would want to be working with her on, like, let's figure out a way to process through this crisis that you're having in a way that is safe and sane, in a way that allows you to like accurately reflect and have a place to deal with these feelings of being not okay. And like, let's talk about that and create a non-judgmental space where we can work through that. You can express those fears to not a friend who's going to tell you, yeah, do the crazy thing. That's cool. That's okay to do that. I want to do that. I want to get out of my life. So let me live my life through you and tell you that, girl, I love you so much. You can do crazy things and I'll still love you anyway. Like, no, this is not safe. And it's scary and it's not going to go the way you think. But working on having a way to process through what makes you feel like you need to do that. Let's talk about that. Let's have dialogue and discourse about that in a non-judgmental space where your thoughts and your feelings will be validated and held free, and kind of work on connecting that. How do we find a healthier thought than I should just go and see this man? I have to go meet him. Like, okay, hold on. Let's process how we get there. And instead of kind of like, would it be possible to meet this man? Does this man want to meet me? Is this man interested? Am I what he's looking for? But before we even deal with any of that, just working on where are these thoughts going? How do they connect to I'm unhappy now? And let's start unraveling that and working on how do I address the fact that I'm so unhappy that I'd be willing to do these ridiculous things and that they seem like a more viable option than having an uncomfortable conversation that I'm going to have anyway at some point. And I think I would really want to work with creating an environment for her where it feels safe to have those conversations so that it doesn't result in such weird, dangerous behavior, because having a place to deal with these thoughts usually mitigates the ridiculous behavior response. Because if you feel like the only thing you can do is to do the thing, then that's what you're going to do. So that I would want to work with her on existential work, understanding her meaning, her value, the direction her life wants to go, and then tying that in together with how do I connect behaviors that make sense with thoughts and feelings that also make sense, and not reach a point where I reach a dysfunctional, inappropriate level thought of I need to do this dramatic, dangerous, risky behavior that will probably not actually make anything better. And that's going to solve my problem, and build myself up to believe that that's true, and create that slippery slope thinking of, well, I can just do this and I can just do that. I can just follow him around and see where he's going. That creates dangerous precedent. And I'd want to work with her on all those things.
That sounds great. I think exactly like what's the desperation? Like where's this desperation coming from?
Right.
Of, like I have to act on these feelings.
The urgency.
And honestly,
right.
Depending on how old she is, I'm kind of backtracking a little bit. Depending on how old she is, there's a lot of mental health diagnoses that the onset is your mid to late 20s. And I would be concerned that she was like having a psychotic break, or like something was manifesting.
Mania
That just hadn't come out, but because how out of character she is would be such a red flag diagnostically.
I mean, the degree of delusional behavior like that would be worrisome, that you'd want to assess for bipolar disorder, and seeing someone in a manic or she's not manic, but hypomanic state. She's not showing signs of like blatant manic behaviors where she's grandiose and erratic and fully dangerous, but the behaviors she's behaving in, while not immediately dangerous, are not safe, and they are not rational, and they are not based in reality, which hypomania is basically mania light. And I think that you could make an argument for that, although there's not enough information, that we don't see any other instability from her, that the level of out of characterness, and then like, being so unaware that she's standing in a street, that's obviously a highway. I think that's a good point, Brittany, that, assessing her for some degree of psychotic break, delusional, or hypomanic behavior would be really important.
So since I'm the resident child therapist, I will say that if I were to see Jonah, I think I wonder if, in the sense of where I would see Jonah is, as dad continues to date, if he continues to act out. Like maybe he would go see a therapist after he flies to New York. And they would be like, he's clearly acting out. He's being impulsive. Like he has his own desperation going on with him, and is trying to get a need met really intensely and in a really dangerous way too. Like he really could have, horrible things could have happened to him. And so I could see him he should have been taken to a therapist. I hope Sam takes him to a therapist. It is the 90s, but I hope Sam takes him to a therapist after this incident. This would definitely be a reason why I would start seeing a kid, is something big happens where they're like, we can't keep ignoring what's going on. And I think the work the work I would think I would do with Jonah is because he is kind of a more savvy kid. Like he's, you can have a full conversation with him. Like he's pretty intelligent. He might be someone, even though he's 8, like I think he could do process with me, which is talk therapy. A lot of times when I work with kids that young, you can do some talk therapy, but you also have to do a lot of more directive work, which is like skills work, like what Ben was talking about with CBT, or play therapy. So like drawing together, or like talking something through, or with him, it could even be like a dollhouse situation where you're like acting out, like, what does a home look like? If I could wave a magic wand, what would my life look like? So you do a lot of prompting, but because he's written by an adult, he's written by Nora Ephron, like the words coming out of his mouth are adult words. I might see how much he could do traditional talk therapy, and if that would help him in the sense of like, what's going on for you? Kind of like the radio therapist already starts, which is, so it sounds like you wanted this thing really bad, and then it has started happening, and how are you feeling now? So I think with him would be a lot of, how are we feeling? Are we recognizing how we're feeling when we're having it? I think also I got my degree in my specialization is in gifted kids. And so let's say if he is gifted, because he does seem really smart, I think a where that can go sideways, a disadvantage of being very smart is you think you're very smart about everything. And I think maybe having a lot of discussions with him about you are a very smart kid, and that doesn't mean that you're an adult or that you know all the ins and outs and sophistication and abstract concepts of being an adult. So it might have to do a lot of reckoning with where he's actually 8 and a kid, and that he's not an adult. He's not his dad's peer. And so it might be a lot of reestablishing where he's at as a child and doing some radical acceptance around that. And also helping him just process, like, there's a new person at home or there's a new person your dad's dating. And so how are you feeling about that? And it probably would be a situation, because he's so young, where Tom Hanks's character, I would probably bring him in every once in a while into family session, either as a family session with Jonah, or maybe just one-on-one and be like, how are things going? Like, to providing what we call parent coaching, which he does okay at, but it'd be like in these situations where, hey, so I heard that, like, how are things going with introducing Jonah to the person you're dating? Like, maybe doing some gentle coaching around that, about how to respond to Jonah. It also gives a chance for Sam to use you as a resource, as the therapist, if he has any questions, because he is single dadding it and he's figuring it out as he goes along. And so it can be a helpful resource for the parent as well about, am I doing this right? Like, should I be doing it differently? And also helping support him through, he'd probably be a parent that I would also maybe recommend go to therapy as well if he isn't already, just because it is a family system thing happening. But I think Jonah would be really fun. He would be a really fun client to have. I really love little kids who can really talk your ear off and they don't have a lot of self-awareness that they are a kid. And I think I might do the same thing with when talking to Sam. Is he might be intellectually a lot older, but he's still 8. Mm-hmm. Are we still treating him like he's 8? Just because he can give you a monologue doesn't mean that he is 14 or 20. Like, he's 8. And so are we treating him like he's 8? Mm-hmm. In the decision making and all these kind of things. So that's where I would go if I had to pick someone from this movie to treat.
So as usual, I don't think about treatment until you guys start talking about it.
I'm like, are you seriously thinking about which one you do? And as a couples therapist?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. because I'm thinking about doing a family session with Sam and Jonah around kind of maybe even the idea that popped into my head is like empty chair, talking to his mom, talking to Sam, having them both kind of process this new transition that they're both in the middle of. I think that would be would be something I'd be interested in. I'm assuming, Ben, that you're talking about Walter and Annie. That's who you think I should be talking about?
I think that you are going to talk about whoever you think is best, because you are a competent and educated professional. An expert in
right.
I would not presume to decide for you who
yes.
you should talk about.
Yes, thank you. Well, I mean, I think I didn't even think about Walter and Annie, to be perfectly honest, until I just said that out loud.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. I mean, but at the same time, I think something I do want to say about their relationship in general is just also knowing that as we grow and learn who we are more and more, that having these kinds of conversations with partners about what you need from them and that what you need from them might change is okay and normal and natural to have happen. Like, we're all, in a lot of different ways, we're all growing and changing all the time. And so having that, just as fucking usual, communication is really important. And if you keep it all to yourself and expect your partner to pick it up, that's not going to happen. You got to tell them. And if you don't know how to tell them, then come see a couples therapist who can help you bridge that gap of what is so hard about talking about this. Because I think, and also, I mean, I don't know if I've even ever talked about this, but premarital couples is actually one of my favorite things to do. For many different reasons, mostly because they don't tend to have as much pent up resentment or hurt feelings.
God, isn't that so nice when you get a couple that doesn't come in like we're about to destroy each other's like existence and fix it.
We already hate each other.
Exactly.
Right. Like I'm going to tear out his throat. Okay, well,
and that maybe I think. Sorry, guys, I feel like I'm all over the place. It's been a crazy week.
That's okay.
I think just something just to point out, kind of in general, about couples therapy is that the sooner you come, the better. Always. Every single time. The reason why statistics about couples therapy and why people say couples therapy didn't work is because they wait too goddamn long to come and have an expectation that I'm going to be able to magically fix something in 4 sessions or less to some capacity. And that's just not going to fucking happen. If it took you 20 years to get to where you are, it's going to take us a while to unpack and create an environment and change patterns and change behaviors and create connection. That's going to take some time. And so I just feel like that is such a big piece of this, which is why part of the reason why, which I'm sure any couples therapist I would imagine would say, premarital couples they give me so much joy to work with because I'm so excited that they're already creating this space where they know that they have things that they want to be healthy or change or grow about themselves and about their relationship. And they're already creating a way to do that. And that not only by getting skills from me before they get married, they're also getting skills that they're also creating a relationship with me where they can come back and see me if something happens. They can come back and see me when things get hard or when there's a transition or if they just need to check in because they can't remember how to talk to each other without screaming, whatever the case might be. And that I think with Annie and Walter, let's say she comes back and is like, I've been acting bananas. I did a bunch of really bananas stuff. I don't know if you would even want to be with me still or not, but I think I want to see a couples therapist because I feel like I still really care about you, but I feel really confused about myself. And I feel like I would have they would come in my office and I would do their individual assessments and kind of check in and see. And it might be something where I don't suggest that they do couples therapy right away. I think in this situation, I would recommend that Annie get individual. I would recommend that they both have individual therapy first. And then they come and see me after they've been doing that for a couple of months, because sometimes one partner or the other has to know themselves a little bit better before we can really dig in and around what's happening, because healing both the individual and the relationship at the same time is almost impossible. It just doesn't work. It doesn't create a healing safe space for me to be able to help create the space that needs to happen in order for there to be healing.
It doesn't.
And
I
also,
loved your point so much about like couples waiting too long. I cannot tell you the number of times that I feel like couples want to walk in and essentially watch you interrogate their partner and correct them on everything that they did wrong so they can watch and sit in glee and say, I told you so. Like, it's almost like they want to reenact that scene from The Dark Knight where like there's 2 therapists in the office, one of them sneaking like in the dark behind, waiting for the other one to say something wrong. So someone comes down and pounds their head on the table and goes, you're wrong, bitch. Like, I see people like that seething energy that people have for each other. They want the therapist just to like come in and fix him or fix her, like, because they're wrong and you need to tell them how wrong they are. And the contempt is palpable in the room.
Well, we're all the heroes in our own story, Ben.
We are. You just have to remember that you never start with the head.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I was going to say, Hannah.
Go ahead,
Brittany. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, in reflecting what you were sharing, is that if you don't recommend individual work, like I've done couples counseling in the past, but I have never like dedicated my space to that. But I've found that in those times when one or both of the parties in the relationship haven't done enough individual work is what I would find myself end up falling into. And I learned from is that you end up kind of doing an individual session with the other partner there.
Yeah.
And if you fall into that too many times, it's usually an indicator that you need to recommend individual therapy, because that's what ends up happening, because barriers keep coming up as you're trying to do like communication work or something. And then you end up hyper focusing on the one. And then it does create that element, that dynamic that you're talking about, Ben, where like, is there a problem person in the relationship? And that's why we keep hyper focusing on them when it's not their fault. It's just that they maybe need more support at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that popped into my head too is also that on the other side of this, we can heal from emotional cheating. We can heal from having an affair. Those are things that can happen if both people are willing to do the work that has to be done in order for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. All right. So do we want to slide into final thoughts, which I feel like we've been peppering in throughout this movie?
Yeah.
Ben, you can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I know Hannah loves this movie. She's got it memorized. It means it is not on the list of things she's never going to watch again. So that's good.
Accurate.
But if we haven't heard that already. So anyway, I probably won't watch this movie again. I've seen it bits and pieces, and I've definitely seen the Empire State Building scene before, and you know, ultimately I think this was a really good Tom Hanks movie and a really bad Meg Ryan movie.
Yes.
Like, I really enjoyed the Tom Hanks scenes. I thought all of that was good. I thought it was like, wow, this is a really good movie that's really well acted with really good actors doing really good things. And then to see like the Bill Pullman and Meg Ryan interactions were just painful and awkward and deliberately so, but then she progressively does more and more bizarre things that just made me feel uncomfortable in my soul, that this is used as the gold standard to represent what romance should look like and how we should find romance, and if we just feel that feeling we should just go with it, and all of these kinds of crazy tropes that creates that make, you know, people's lives miserable. And I just it didn't do it for me. Like, I thought the cinematography was great. The directing is great. Most of the writing is really good. Just, it was two separate stories that intertwined, and like the concept was good in theory. And I, you know, thought the movie was pretty good. Watching it is definitely better than some of the other rom-coms I've had to watch that we've analyzed that made me want to like punch myself in the skull. But to watch this one, again, I'm probably not, because of how uncomfortable the Meg Ryan story made me. And it just, such a beautiful side of how we deal with grief and how we move on, and then this just completely ridiculous side story that mucked it all up.
Yes, I would say I saw this movie in theaters when I must have been 7 years old. I wonder, I saw it with my grandma. It makes me wonder if she wanted to see the movie, and I just happened to be with her. And so she was like, I think there's a kid in this movie. I think you can relate. And so I don't even remember seeing it. I remember being in the lobby, but I don't remember the actual movie itself. It's definitely a movie that I think I love because all I remember is the Tom Hanks stuff. Like when I was watching it last night, I did remember thinking like, I don't know if I can recall a single full scene of Meg Ryan's in this movie, but I can recall in like depth, like all the discussions that happened between Tom Hanks and Jonah and all those kind of things. So I think exactly what you were saying, Ben, you said it perfectly. This is a great Tom Hanks movie and a horrible Meg Ryan movie. And it makes me wonder, and if anyone has any information on this, email, because I want to know, like if this movie started somewhere different and ended up here. Like if that, maybe it was supposed to be just a movie about Tom Hanks' story, and they were like, no, we have to make it romantic. We got to like shove the Meg Ryan part into it. Or maybe that looked differently and then it became this weird soulmate magical thing. I wonder if this was always what the movie was going to be like, because based on what you're saying, Ben, Nora Ephron's written a lot of movies. She wrote You've Got Mail and When Harry Met Sally. And both of those movies are stories about relationships that evolve very organically over long periods of time. You know, You've Got Mail, it's over like maybe a year, like a few years, like maybe like a year or two.
I think it's like a year.
Yeah. And with Harry Met Sally, it's like decades. And so what do people slowly realize that they're friends and that they also are in love with each other. So this movie is a real shift for Nora Ephron in terms of that style, where it's so magical and so kind of rooted in almost nothing and has no backbone to it. Whereas their other movies are, what I love about those other two movies is how organic and how much both of those movies, When Harry Met Sally and You've Got Mail, like are founded on friendship and like genuine affection for the other person that then you realize is also romantic. So it does make me very curious about how this movie came to be. Because it's just so bonkers. Like the Meg Ryan stuff, it's like, I was like, I think I said to Hannah when we were watching it, I don't even know if I'm supposed to like this person. Like she's fake. She seems fake. She's laughing too hard. She's kind of boring. Her hair is horrible, which isn't really her fault. Like she's doing wacky shit all the time. And I'm just like, I think juxtapose. Oh my God. How do I say that word?
Juxtaposition? Juxtaposing?
I'm not going to try and say it.
Real the story with Tom Hanks is.
Yeah.
Oh, juxtaposed with how real the story with Tom Hanks is, it's like glaring how wacky her story is.
Right, like one felt like a A-level movie and one felt like a bad B movie.
Yes.
And like
about
like a Walmart dollar movie.
Like no offense to her, but like a Katherine Heigl movie from like 2010, you know? Just Yikes. Like when rom-com started getting really weirdly high concept and just like he's a bounty hunter and she's a criminal and they used to be married. It's like when they started being like insert wacky shenanigans here. And so it's like she's a wacky shenanigans and he's like a really like grounded story about grief and moving on. And I love like the Rob Reiner stuff. Like I love him. When Harry Met Sally is based on Rob Reiner's divorce. Funny enough, he's the Billy Crystal of that movie. I just listened to an Unspooled episode about When Harry Met Sally, so it's fresh in my noggin. But I would say I love the Tom Hanks part so much that I probably will revisit this movie and just kind of space out during the Meg Ryan parts.
Right. I did have one more final thought that I wanted to add. Well, you kind of triggered it of thinking about like all of this. I think also should stand as a testament to guys to if every woman in America fell in love with this guy who was just being emotionally aware and competent and vulnerable, like, hey, maybe you should take some notes that this movie is showing you that it's okay to just be a person and connect, and that you might actually find that this bravado bullshit that you try to emulate from the movies written for us is not what is actually what people are interested in. And, take notes there.
And also the bar for men is in hell. Yeah. The bar for men cannot be lower. Like if that is how you can really meet the standards and surpass it is like, talk about
act like a human.
Just be aware that they exist.
Act like a fucking human. Just because you're a man doesn't mean you have feelings.
And just have to look like Tom Hanks, who's the definition of a normal looking person.
Right. Very, very normal looking dude. I forgot he was young once, though.
Yeah. So I really love this movie, but I think it's mostly tied up with going to the movies. I definitely saw this movie in the movie theater. I might have been with my grandmother, but I'm not really sure. But for some reason,
this is the second time. I miss it so much.
I just can't think about it, to be perfectly honest.
Brittany talked about being in a lobby of a movie theater, and I was thinking about like all the pop-ups and the smell of the candy and the popcorn. I'm like,
just look at the posters to see what's coming up.
I love doing that.
God, I fucking
my wife hates when I do that. I just poke around the whole thing. What's coming out next? What is that?
And like the weird toys that they have at the one in Evanston. But like how they always have like this one section that has like toys and t-shirts. That like you've never seen anywhere else, and also like what the fuck, why do they sell t-shirts here?
Right.
Sorry, that's a huge side note. So I think part of the reason why I love this movie so much is because it just, for some reason, it connects me to my grandmother. And I think it's because of An Affair to Remember, because I remember watching that movie with her, and I really think that's part of what it is. And also I just friggin' love Tom Hanks. And I love the relationship between him and his son. And I there's so many good parts there that I think that overrides the stuff that happens with Meg Ryan and Becky. And so I'm sure I'll watch it a billion more times and that's why I love it. I don't love it because I want there to be a magical ending to the world. I love it because I love watching Tom Hanks just be a sweet dad, which in my heart, I feel like he just probably is a really sweet dad, actually, as a person. And that it, I don't know. It's one of those memories of being at the movies that like I remember all the time. I can remember the credits in the beginning and being like, I've never heard this song before, and just all of those different pieces. So that's why I feel like I love this movie so much and why I know all the words. Yeah,
it's like this movie. It had this movie ended like Roman Holiday does, like where it ends the way it should have ended, where it had to end that way. That made sense, and they just let it be okay that Tom Hanks and her never met, that she never went to the top of the building and saw him. She didn't see the heart and went, I have to go. And the guy's like, I have to go. Or he'd be like, yeah, you have to go. Like, what? Like, just like let it end the way it's supposed to, where she realizes she's not supposed to be with him. He finds his son. They realize that this isn't crazy banana town. And then I would like it a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would definitely feel a lot different. And I would say, like, a final note of why I like this movie so much, too, is you can tell that Tom Hanks is a dad and the way he interacts with this kid in the movie. I feel like how physical he is with this kid is very much someone who is around kids and knows that kids aren't breakable. Like, specifically when he shakes that washcloth and he, like, shoves it in his face and, like, rubs it around his face. I feel like someone who doesn't have kids or hasn't been around kids would not feel like they could do that. They would be a lot more delicate with a kid.
Was he a dad at this point? As I know, his wife is in this.
Colin Hanks, he had with his first marriage. I remember hearing Colin Hanks tell a story about being on the set of Splash, which is like 10 years before this movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let us know what you guys think. I feel like if you don't feel the same as us, that's okay. And you can even write us an email at popcornpsychology@gmail.com if you want to. We're always open. You can find us on Instagram at Popcorn Psychology, Facebook at Popcorn Psychology, Twitter at popcorn_psych. I feel the way you guys might be feeling, which is that when we talk about a beloved movie that even I beloved, I get a little, that I'm going to watch it as a therapist and then ruin it for myself. So I understand if anyone's having some hard feelings after listening to us rip this movie apart a bit more than I even thought we would.
I do not apologize.
I just feel like it's like, that's what we do. That's why we do rom-coms for Valentine's Day, because we're trying to give an accurate, somewhat reality check of all of the bullshit that we're fed in terms of media, in terms of romance, in terms of what love is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to feel like.
I think someone needs to make Hannah like a little GIF. Maybe we can put it on our TikTok. Someone give like Hannah the world star like sunglasses and cigarette when she does things like that. We're trying to stop all the bullshit.
Yeah. And I will say, if you want a different take, listen to our Valentine's Day episode on 10 Things I Hate About You, where we surprisingly was all for it. We signed that movie off. Check.
That's true.
So I think So I think what's interesting, I think what we continue to observe about doing this show now that I think it's our 3-year anniversary, maybe right now, or when this comes out, is that when we imagined the idea, we imagined it in the February of like 2018, is that I'm always surprised about what movies do really well when we look at them through a therapist lens. I never would have thought 10 Things I Hate About You would have hit it out of the park. And that this movie would be so torrentially bad about realism. Yeah. So anyway, you can find us at all those social media platforms. We forget to mention all the time, we do have a Patreon. If you want to, sponsor us in any content, we do have a Patreon you can find if you just Google Patreon Popcorn Psychology. Also, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We see those reviews, we share those reviews. They help us immensely in getting out there to other people. And happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, and before we sign off here, we just started a TeePublic store.
Oh, yeah.
So you can get all kinds of gear that if you want any, of course, you can get T-shirts, hoodies, masks, coffee mugs, throw pillows, all kinds of stuff, anything you want that has our logo on it. And please, guys, share the message, share us, like us. The reviews and the likes and the shares go so much farther when you're at the level we're at. We really do appreciate when you guys do that. And we thank you so much for listening.